English language teaching. Under the covers.
Hello and welcome back to ELT Under the Covers, where we, as English language teaching professionals, we look at the good and the bad of teaching clips on the internet. Today, we have a little bit of a comedy skit that we're going to look at that's going to bring up some questions that are pertinent to English language teaching. But first, introductions. I am Neil of Team Teacher fame, and I'm joined always by the Professor Rich.
Pro gaming. Check it out. Twitch.tv/Prof Rich Gaming. I'm a gaming expert. Also, I've been teaching for 15 years and I've got every qualification known to man when it comes to teaching.
But mostly we're bothered about the gaming aspect. It fits.
Yeah, on our teaching podcast, absolutely. The gaming aspect is critical. This podcast is all about expertise.
In whatever field.
Authority.
Exactly. Now, today we're going to be looking at a clip from a British sketch girl called Smack the Pony. I think it was an all-female sketch show. And they did a little sketch about TEFL. And I think it might lead to an interesting conversation. So, should we jump into that sketch and let's have a look?
In a few weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Is this free?
Yes.
Great. Could I register for one of your courses, please?
Of course you can. Do you have the reference number there?
I do. It's EF4, English as a Foreign Language, beginner's level.
And can I take your name?
Yes, you can. It's Jackie O'Farrell.
And the name of the person who will be taking the course?
Jackie O'Farrell.
Sorry, it's for yourself.
Well, yes.
But you are English.
Well, I know that.
Well, so you speak English already then, presumably?
Well, of course I do, but I only speak English. I don't know how to speak it as a foreign language. Just listen. Foreign people can't understand a word I'm saying at the moment. So it's going to benefit them and me.
Yeah, but English as a foreign language is English.
That's not a problem.
Look, I think maybe with the communication abroad thing, what you're really looking for is just a simple foreign language.
Could you, don't tell me what I do and don't want to study. I don't want to do that. That is too difficult. I want to start with something easy.
I think you may find it of limited use, given that you do already speak English.
I want to learn it as a foreign language.
English is just English. What about teaching as a foreign language?
Yeah.
Teaching English as
well,
a
until I can speak English as a foreign language, I can't really teach it.
English is only a foreign language to foreign people. You can only learn English as foreign if you yourself are foreign to English. Shall I do a Venn diagram?
Don't draw anything. You do foreign as an English language.
Let's try Robin. I think he's in charge of that.
E4.
I would say about that, well, first of all, very funny. And, well, the issue that it raised for me...
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, the issue that really comes to mind for me is that actually I think you can learn English as a foreign language as an English speaker, and it's the ability to communicate with people who perhaps don't have a particularly high level of English, and that is a skill.
Yeah. That's kind of the interpretation that I went with. I was like, this is a joke and it sounds stupid, but I know so many people that I've traveled abroad with, or gone traveling to native English speakers that I've traveled with to non-native English speaking countries, where they speak in a language other than English. And, it's funny how difficult that how much difficulty they have communicating with, speakers, English speakers, non-native English speakers in that country. And, I feel like an actual, a little bit of a short course on communication, because that's what we're talking about, and how to better communicate in English to a non-native English speaker, would be really beneficial.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree. I'm sure there are courses like that, but they're obviously not popularized, or maybe people don't see the value in it. They just think they can barrel through. Oh, it's not my, it's the non-native's job to try and speak well or whatever. Although I think in general, English people are not as closed-minded about that as people in other languages. And the reason for that is because native English speakers are constantly exposed to non-native English speakers. It's almost impossible these days to be a native English speaker who doesn't regularly have conversations with non-native speakers. As pretty much everyone does. There's non-natives everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I think English-speaking people tend to be much more open-minded about this than speakers of other languages, quite frankly, in my experience. I mean, you probably remember learning Spanish, how much they'll slam you down if you make a tiny mistake. And it's like, hold on. I mean, imagine if we did that to like non-native English speakers all the time. It'd be nuts.
I mean, I never really encountered that. I mostly encountered them. I know what I'm saying is correct, but maybe I'm saying it a bit off or something. And to the point where I'm like, it's not that off, is it though, really? I think you just don't have an ear for it. But it's kind of like, I think that's one of the difficulties, isn't it, with, native English speakers, non-native English speakers communicating, is oftentimes it's not how good your English is or how good their English is, it's how well you both meet in the middle. Because you could be the best communicator in the world, but if the other person's you've got a slight accent or something, they might just go like, I can't listen to you. I can't understand what you're saying. And fair enough, some people just don't have that ear. But doing a course like this might be very beneficial.
I totally agree. And the irony about all this, given the very funny sketch, is that I think, ironically, a native English speaker sitting in on a TEFL classroom would probably learn things about communicating with non-natives if they'd never sort of done a lot of it before.
Yeah.
So
they wouldn't just default to that speak louder, speak slower.
Or making up words. That's the worst. Duo, uo, understando.
At what point is it? It kind of feels like when people do that, there's tinges of like, I don't think racism, but like aggression with your language, just that they don't understand. I think maybe people just don't, or just get so frustrated, and they express it in this really passive aggressive way. Because I've seen people do stuff like that. It's
difficult, isn't it, without judging someone one way or the other.
Yeah.
But I think it does tend to be people who have a bit of a superiority complex, and I don't think it's to do with the fact that the people they're speaking to are foreign.
Yeah.
I think it's to do with the fact that the people they're speaking to are in the service industry, and as far as they're concerned, have to do what they want when they want it. And there are a lot of people like that in the world. So when that person is foreign, then they get annoyed because it's like, well, why are you not doing what I want to, whatever.
Yeah.
So it comes across as patronizing for a good reason, because if they were with a native speaker who was being their waiter or whatever and had got something wrong, then they'd be just as they'd come across as just as patronizing about it, I think.
Yeah. My other point that kind of came from that was so there was a point where she's saying, well, maybe you should teach English as a foreign language, and she's saying, well, I've got to learn it as a foreign language first. What would you say for learning English as a a language to be able to teach English as a language, because I know a lot of people, especially like my generation, we didn't do grammar at school unless you went to some private school or something, and yet they're out in the world, and maybe they don't know English as a language per se, like all the grammar, the rules, obviously they're fluent and they can presumably write, perfectly or what have you. But how much do you think a teacher, if they're going to teach English, should know English? Let's just say at the beginning. Obviously, at higher levels, you're going to need to know.
Well, I think at this point, it's probably well worth dropping in Mr. John Kay's little perspective on it, because I think he had quite a nice take that I don't agree with 100%, but I did quite like it. And he was basically saying that, you don't need to worry about grammar, but what you do need to do is you do need to dive into it yourself. So when you get a question from a student about something, then, and if you don't know it, then you definitely need to follow up on that. You need to ask yourself, why is this? Why is this the way it is? And just, you can do it yourself, can't you? You look at this, you look at that, you do, and then you put the pieces together. And I think going through that process is really helpful for teachers and necessary. So it's kind of becoming a bit of a linguist, actually. But it's a linguist without the tradition of lingualism. No, without the tradition of being a linguist, without relying on the academic tradition of linguistics. It's you yourself being like an investigative linguist with your own language. And I liked that as a perspective. And I think 100% that is true, because myself, I have definitely moved away from grammar teaching, and I still bring it up, and I'll still use phrases like the present perfect and stuff like this. But I would absolutely not want to base a syllabus on it. I almost certainly wouldn't have it as a lesson goal. It'd be the kind of thing that might come up, I think it's much more useful to see language functionally, to be like, okay, we've got this functional phrase which is used for saying that we completed a thing recently, and that functional phrase is "have just." So I've just done it, just done my homework, I've just called them. Right now, grammatically, we'd start calling that the present perfect and make it all complicated by saying subject plus auxiliary plus all the rest of it. But if we just teach it as a functional phrase of just, it becomes a lot simpler. And the only real grammar of it then is you've got of just and you've got the participle. So I've just done it. I've just told them. I've just asked her. I've just finished. I've just been in the toilet. I've just finished my coffee. So, and I think I think that's much easier to digest, and I think that's the way that people should approach it. I've got a load more to say about that. Is there anything you want to jump in and say before I kind of go?
No, I completely agree with you, because what you're basically saying is, you're saying that rather than trying to like read someone the rule sheet from the game, you're just going through the different pieces, going, okay, this does this, this does this, this is. I mean, I kind of think of it as like a chess analogy, rather than kind of going through the roles, you just, as you're playing, go, okay, now this one does this, okay, now this one does this, or that's when you're teaching. But if you're kind of like going through the process of learning this, it's, when you need it, you look it up. And yeah, I think that's a decent approach to a certain point.
Even looking it up, I think looking it up is I mean, it's a phase that I went through because I didn't really know any better, and I haven't done enough teacher training to know if you can train teachers without them having looked anything up. But I would like to think that the ideal situation would be that you actually don't need to look anything up. You can just do it all from your knowledge of the language. It's just a matter of actually going away when you get a question and analyzing a bit and thinking about it. Unfortunately, that takes time. effort, and perhaps kind of a bit of an analytical mind as well. So if you're not particularly analytically minded, then this might not be a good prescription for that kind of teacher. And that would go against John Kay's thing as well. You know, if someone is not very analytical, I mean, he himself claims to be not particularly academic, but there are people who really don't like to analyze things. You know, they just like to have the information, know that that's how it is, and not have to sit around thinking about it. And if someone is like that, then it's kind of tough to say to them, well, you can't use the grammar book, you've got to just work it all out yourself. So maybe there is a case for that.
Yeah, and there's
so
also there's sometimes, you know, you have native English speakers and they're not exactly speaking, I don't know, speaking English correctly, in that it's per standard. So, you know, like I remember coming across stuff because there's regional differences because I'm from like Yorkshire, and there's a lot of phrases and words that I would have used when I was younger that technically aren't correct in English, that would, you know, add further confusion in the classroom, I think, more than it need. I think I can't remember it now because I'm really out of that, but stuff like I think I've done that yesterday or something like that. It's weird, you know, stuff like that. But you know, some people, you know, they don't. Maybe their English, especially writing, is not very good at all, and they're not confident in their own English. So that's kind of more why I say look it up, because, you know, maybe if they're trying to analyze it, they don't. What parameter do they have to analyze it with? You know, how do they know if it's correct or not?
The thing is about this, Neil, is this is the prescriptive versus descriptive thing. And I think that was partly John Kay's point, that he'd been told by his teacher trainers XYZ about the way that he spoke English. And it was only much later on in his teaching career when he got to the point where he had the confidence to say, I'm a native English speaker. I don't need anyone telling me how to speak English. And that's when he threw away the grammar books and did it his own way. So, you know, to go to your example about what's right and wrong, well, anything you say and understand is right. It might be regional, that doesn't make it wrong.
Yeah.
And anyone who says it's wrong is a grammarian. And, you know, we're moving away from that as a communication model in general.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think that there are limitations. I think there's a middle ground between prescriptive and you know, just more native and organic, and that is, I guess, the supposed standard. And especially, it might be fine, you know, if you're a native English speaker and you grew up with that, then, well, you know, you're always right. Sure, that's fine. But does it fit with what the school model is teaching that you have to adhere to? And then it kind of gets down into really nitty gritty questions like, what do you actually mean by native English speaker? Like, for example, Fanny, you know, the better half of Team Teacher, she came to Canada when she was 4 or 5. Now, I consider her a native speaker. Sometimes she doesn't herself. I think she is. Yeah. But you know, does that mean that she's her first language was not English? She didn't learn it until she was 4.
Does she still consider English to not be her first language? Like,
well, no, it's not her first language. It's literally not her first. But it's what it's her.
Doesn't necessarily mean the language that came first.
It's her strongest language.
Right. Okay. So if she was writing a diary, she would write.
She would write in English. She thinks in English.
100%. She's 100% a native.
Yeah,
if such a thing as a native exists.
But that's what I'm saying. You know, like that you can drill down to minutia and like, well, what do you really mean with that?
Yeah, I agree, Neil, and that's the kind of discussion that people in applied linguistics love to have. I don't particularly. Well, it's an interesting conversation. but I don't think it's massively helpful because, you know, you get people extreme one way or the other. They try to deconstruct the entire thing and say there is no such thing as a native. And then you get into all kinds of weird discussions about, well, should we just teach communication and how do we have any rules? We always get around to the same thing, which is there are some benefits to having some idea of a standard, even if we accept that the standard is platonic. And maybe that's the point you were making originally when you said, well, if I were to teach something that is a bit of a colloquialism from a region where I'm from, and is that going to be useful to students? And I think a particularly good point you made, or that you implied, is how students are more likely to be stigmatized for something which doesn't sound right because they can't rely on that, hey, I'm a native. And even natives can't sometimes. I remember going to the US and some New Zealand guy couldn't understand me. And I said something like 3 times to him and he couldn't understand me. And he said, where are you from or whatever? And I said, England. And he actually got annoyed about it. He was like, well, speak English or whatever, and like got annoyed. Really, I should have got annoyed about it, right?
Yeah.
This was obviously a long time ago when I had a bit of a different accent, a bit more of a Liverpudlian accent. And, you know, so it can happen even to natives. So of course it'll happen to non-natives. They will experience people like that. Not everyone in the world is going to be a nice person. You don't necessarily have to jump to the conclusion that it's because of some sort of prejudice against foreigners or whatever. It can just be that they're just not a nice person. Yeah. So I agree with you. And that's why I do always try to have a standard, but also I think that first and foremost, you go with your language, and go with that and explore that. But then, yeah, okay. Yeah, I see where you're going with it. Maybe completely throwing away the grammar references is not necessary. Maybe it's nice to have them there, especially for someone who feels that they do need to consult if something is particularly correct or not.
Yeah.
And you do have to have a bit of autonomy with it though, to decide for yourself.
Yeah.
Because, you know, me, for example, I'm definitely someone who's ready to say, you know, forget all it. Don't worry about all this fewer nonsense. You can just say less all the time. You know, I'm ready to say that. Now, there are loads of English teachers who disagree with that and get quite heated about it. No, it's fewer people and it's less money or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but half the native population of the country doesn't say fewer. Yeah. So why are you teaching the rest of the world to try and say it, you know? So, you know, I've kind of let go of that one. But even then, I might point it out as a point of interest to a student, but I would consider it a low priority thing to say to them. Yeah. Especially if time's an issue in the class.
No, I agree with that. I think the most important point of all of this is being able to analyze and to think what is the priority, and always to keep that in mind. So we're looking at, you know, efficient, effective communication, and you know, if I focus on, you know, the fewer and less debate, I'm depriving the student of something that's maybe more pertinent to their lives. And I think it even refers back to the idea of, you know, when you're talking about grammar or function, it makes sense to lean more into function because that's more pertinent to, you know, what they're doing in their life, rather than just this esoteric grammar rule. You know, how do you even apply that? It makes more sense to, you know, apply it within, you know, that form of function. But I think it's one of those things that if you are, I'm not going to say intelligent, I don't think that's the right word, but if that is your focus, you naturally gravitate towards being more efficient and effective with your communication. I think that's quite telling for us, because if you listen to our accents now, I can compare it to accents when, I guess, we first met, or even before that when we were growing up, you know, with my strong Yorkshire, Sheffield accent, and you've got your Liverpudlian accent, and I'm not sure how many people would be even able to detect that as much nowadays, because I've got clips, like mine was pretty damn strong, you know. And I've not intentionally this new teacher accent, as I often call it, is not intentional. It's just it's evolved to be this way because I think in my mind I think it's because I'm trying to be clearer when I'm speaking.
Yeah, probably. And also just being international, your language will tend to standardize a little bit, and being an English teacher might standardize a little bit. And, you know, being a broadcaster would also, you tend to you kind of move towards the BBC, don't you? If you're doing that kind of stuff. So there's definitely an element of that. So what you were talking about is how the way people speak changes over time. That's totally true for everyone. The way everyone speaks changes over time. The words you use and the pronunciation and everything. All these things, I think, would be very complicated and perhaps overcomplicated to sort of discuss with a new teacher. Yeah. So I think, you know, how do we apply this to a teacher and to the clip, and where is the point?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think we have to ironically, with the little time we have left, we have to expand out the discussion a little bit, because we were just talking about knowing, for example, the grammar, and then we kind of touched on the pronunciation of the language. Whereas in reality, we've got everything to learn about the language that we don't already know, other than the pedagogy. I mean, that's like the two aspects of teaching. And I think generally on this channel, we tend to sort of lean into the pedagogy and say, there's not enough pedagogy going on here. You know, when we looked at things like mind your language and stuff like that, and they're writing here's, you are, and all that nonsense on the board and doing the grammar, well, obviously the knowledge of the language is sound for that particular basic lesson, but the pedagogy is miles away from where it needs to be. So we tend to emphasize that. But here we're talking about, well, what about the limitations of actual knowledge? Are there expertise to learn as a teacher? I commonly criticize professors at universities for being extreme experts in a subject, but having almost no knowledge of educational theory or how to actually impart knowledge into the students effectively. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of flip that on its head for English teachers and say, English teachers are so good pedagogically. Well, but what about expertise? Well, yes, you do. And normally what happens in English language teaching is you pick up the majority of it on the job. You already have this kind of innate ability. Mm-hmm. What we might say is you're someone who's been playing guitar and listening to music your whole life, and then suddenly you have to teach people how to play guitar and how to like write songs. Let's say you just wrote songs on your own, but you don't know anything about standard notation. You don't know what the chords are called. You don't know what C, D, E, and F are. Mm-hmm. You're just someone who just played, listened, and made music, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you've been doing your whole life. And now suddenly you've got these people saying to you, oh yeah, I want to write a song in C minor, or what notes go with, and you don't know what they're talking about. And this is like your students asking you about the English language. So yeah, you do need to learn about those things because they are really useful. If someone has been playing guitar since they're 2 years old and they did it outside of society, 2 years old, 5 years old, they did it outside of society and they never had access to the other information, then that's perfectly okay. And they did it their way, and maybe they're a genius at guitar, but they don't know anything about the theory. But if someone comes to you and they're 20 and they say, I want to learn guitar, then it's really effective to talk about chords and scales and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Because if you just go in with this idea of just like, oh, just learn it the way I learned it. It's like, well, I haven't got 20 years and I don't want to spend 20 hours a day practicing like we did as natives. Yeah. You know, we had our parents there, blah, 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 for years and years and years. And then we went to school, blah, 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 with our friends for years and years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And most non-native learners don't have that. So that's why we need to use these certain tools. We have to have an analytical, to some extent, we have to have some analytical understanding of certain things. This is why we have phonemic charts. A lot of beginner teachers, they might sort of look at the phonemic chart and go, I don't need that. What's the point in that? And I'll just go, it's. Or I'll make up my own phonemics, right? Yeah. Which actually I think there's something to be said for that. But personally, I like the phonemic chart. I like the symbols, and I don't think it takes a great deal of effort to learn. And I think if you introduce it piece by piece, it can be quite useful. But there's millions of things to learn. There's phonemic chart. There's all the different. There's all the sounds of English. Then there's kind of like things associated with certain learners, which I guess kind of bleeds into pedagogy, but like what specific problems with certain sounds the learners have. And then you've got the grammar, and then you've got the vocabulary, and then you've got like the whole sort of idea of things like context and all that kind of stuff. I guess we're sort of bleeding into pedagogy with that. But the thing is, there is a lot of stuff to learn, and I don't think you can learn it before you're on the job. I think that would be a bad way to learn it. I think if we had like a degree, which I'm sure there is one, but I think if we had like a degree which was like teach English as a foreign language, 3 years degree, is there? I think unless that degree involves a huge practical element, and by that I mean like you're teaching for like 10, 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
Right. And you're getting observed on a lot of that time, and there's loads of that could be great. But if this is like something where you're like sitting around learning about someone like me, standing at the front going like, okay, so the phonemic chart has many uses and I'm going to tell you about it now, then, you know, you might take my word for it or you might not. But either way, you're not going to be that convinced unless you're actually in the classroom doing stuff and using it.
Yeah.
So I think that the learning, the knowledge kind of goes hand in hand with the teaching. And I think this goes all the way back to the very start of this, when you said, how much knowledge of English does a native need to become an English language teacher? Mm-hmm. And I would say, as a native language teacher, they're ready to go in a classroom, but they need guidance. Mm-hmm. And they need to be prepared to learn and analyze language and not just think, you know, no, but I'm just a native, and you know, why do we say it like that? Because we do. Yeah, it's just sometimes we do have to say that, because if you get a million questions from a student, eventually it does get to the point that why is it a wide range of items, and why is it not a big selection? Why do we say a wide range of products, not a big selection of products? Well, we just do. Although you could go into collocations, and again, that's something that would come with experience, and that's knowledge of the language. And students will accept that kind of explanation more, because if I start talking to a student about collocations, the importance of them, and we go through exactly what they are, then they'll start to accept it more. Whereas if you just kind of fold your arms and go, well, big selection sounds wrong, and wide range sounds good. Mm-hmm. It's not as useful, and you're more likely to have students kind of, I don't know, especially when they've gone through their school systems and kind of had grammar drilled into them. So they want the yes answer or the no answer. Yep. And you have to at least have the confidence to be able to back up your expertise in the classroom.
Yeah, it's kind of going from a level of you are an expert in your language, but you're not an expert in teaching. So you do move through and level up. And as you level up, sometimes you do have to, I guess, level up your English in that, you know, you have to have more insight with it. And yeah. So it's kind of like a little bit of an arms race that you've got going on. Yeah. And it's just, I find that it's an interesting process to go through, because it's more like you're doing a vocation. It's a vocation rather than something that's academic. You have to do it a bit, learn on the job, and learn kind of like where you're going wrong, or you know, like bits that you're not sure with, and then improve upon that. It's just, and if you're a good teacher, you lead into that, you go down that route. But the thing is, often with these backpack teachers or something like that, it's easy to just rely on your expert level and entertain. But that's it's kind of doing everyone a disservice if you do that. But I thought, just then was an excellent summary of why someone, how someone should think about TEFL when they're first getting into it and teaching English, and that process of becoming a better teacher. I think that was an overall great summary of how you reach that.
Maybe a little bit waffly, but yeah, more or less. I think.
I think
some interesting points.
You've got a good little. I think it's a good thesis going on there, and then I'm sure this will come up in further podcasts that we do, where it'll become more and more succinct in the same process that you have just outlined just now.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, grinding it out, whittling it down, perfecting it.
Yeah, it's like things go alongside each other, and I certainly I don't think everyone can be an English language teacher.
Oh,
just like
spicy
I don't think everyone can necessarily be a professional basketball player or whatever. Right? I think we have some natural propensities to certain things. There's definitely room for lots of different styles of English language teacher, all kinds of things. Like I know some people who are just amazing with kids, and they do all this stuff with puppets that will blow your mind, and it's just so fun and entertaining. And, for that, maybe you don't need to have a great lot of analyzing what's a useful way of presenting something to students and understanding terms like functional language or whatever. Maybe you don't even need. You're never going to need to do that. No 3-year-old is ever going to ask you, "Excuse me, miss, what do you mean by functional language?" You wouldn't even have to say it. They're too busy. No, look, Mr. Fox, let's talk about the story or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely room for different styles, but I don't think everyone can do it. And I do think because I have definitely met some English teachers who they're just really not cut out to understand the language. And it's not that their language is bad. This is not the thing that the tutors of John Kay were telling him. They're natives, it's fine. But I do think that some people are just, because you can't just expect the fact that you're a native to magically teach your students. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And even if you're an entertaining, charismatic native, and even if they're hooked on your words, unless your students are outstanding students who can just use you as a model and analyze everything, then, it's like if I was going to teach you on guitar right now, right? I could even demonstrate this. And I take my guitar and I could kind of, let's say that I'm a native English teacher who hasn't analyzed guitar and thought about how to teach you certain things. And I could just say, oh yeah, Neil, right. So get your guitar, right? Put your hand like that, all right, and just do that. Yeah, and just do that. And then for your next one, right, then you do that. Okay, all right, go on then, Neil, do that. And that's probably not going to be that useful to you. It might be useful to you because I know that you know a bit of guitar, but if I was teaching guitar to someone, that might not be too useful to them, because do that and then do that, and then there you go. It's not enough really, is it? We need more of a framework than that to teach someone. Even if you yourself, when you learned guitar, you didn't have that framework. Well, that's because you spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And this is the same thing with languages. And our students don't have that. They need the hot tips. They need the things that are going to accelerate. So that's why we give them language chunks, and we have the phrase language chunks, and that's why we talk about collocations, and that's why we have all these kind of English language terminology that we don't necessarily need to use in the class, but we need to understand the concepts so we plan what we're actually going to teach them.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it moves. So it basically, what you have is if you're just going into this and you're just going in off the back that you're a native English speaker, and that's it. it's basically you're kind of like treating it as a hobby or a conversation or something like that. But if you're in a classroom and you're being paid, then it's a job, and it should be treated as such, in that you should be looking at ways to improve how you do that job. Um, I think like a lot of it comes down to that. Whereas, those ones that you say maybe shouldn't be English language teachers is because they don't have that mindset of that I should be trying to find ways to better help my students learn, rather than just going, well, I'm the native English speaker. There we go.
You can't just be a model.
Yeah.
There has to be other elements of it.
Yeah.
And in order to even be able, even if you were going to plan a class, which does just involve you being a model pretty much, and has some scaffolding to help the students discover things about that model which are beneficial for them to take, then you'd still need to have an understanding of some kind of analytics of the language, as well as some knowledge of techniques and teaching and so on, in order to be able to plan a class like that. And a class like that could be fantastic. It's kind of task-based learning.
Yeah, I don't think it needs, and I don't think it needs necessarily to go through the education system, or go through getting credentials, or even, as you say, like referring to, grammar books or anything like that. And I think that's kind of what, tying back to what John Kay was saying, is just as long as you have that mindset of, well, okay, I wasn't sure of when this came up in class, so I'm going to work this out myself. Or even the mindset of, and maybe you don't learn about pedagogy, but you go, well, how can I better teach this? This works this way, this works that way. Okay, I'm going to try doing this way a little bit more. So that idea of, improving and finding ways to be more effective as a teacher, outside of, all these ways of, referencing all studies on the language, or referencing all these studies and academia around teaching and pedagogy. But as long as you are looking at ways to improve your pedagogy and your language, you're eventually going to get there. I think this stuff, if you can reference the academia pedagogy and the language and the linguistic side of thing, sometimes it can make it a little bit easier, or just give you ideas that will better fit your own, or give you a different perspective on your own to improve upon that. But I think the very core of it is that you are looking to improve and be more effective at teaching, and it's a discipline. And the teachers that I think, when we think about them, where they rest on their laurels, they rest on their idea of what teaching is based on their own experience, and replicate that, and then use the language that they are experts in, but don't really think about it. The reason that they aren't great teachers is because they aren't doing anything to improve upon that lot. And I think the debate comes down to, well, should they or shouldn't they? And I think if you're being paid and you have someone that's reliant on you to acquire this skill, this language even, that you should be looking at ways, or trying to figure out ways to better do that for them. That's the job. So if you don't do that, you're doing them a disservice and yourself a disservice.
Yeah, and there's a lot to learn about that.
Yeah.
And some people will come into teaching realizing that, and some people won't. And ironically, I think I actually didn't in my first year of teaching, at least. I very much thought, yeah, no problem. I can do this my own way and be. And I come up with some good stuff, but I come up with some bad stuff as well. And there's loads of stuff that I've learned since then. Obviously,
Yeah.
Even if I go back a few years, there's loads of stuff I've learned that's way better than the stuff I previously had. And I'm not just talking about like this activity, that activity, or whatever, but just everything. The way you frame the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Knowing about how languages are actually learned. That's something you have to know about. Mm-hmm. And it's really helpful to know that. Are languages learned by repetition? Just that? Well, no. I mean, what is the downside to flashcards? There are some serious ones, apart from the fact that they're boring and repetitive. There's some massive ones when it comes to retention and memory. And what can you do instead? So knowing about those things, I think is critical. But you learn it along the way. Yeah. You start, you go. I would advocate certain courses, but not all courses are equal. Not all CELTAs are equal. And I thought my CELTA was okay. I've heard some people who really didn't like their CELTA. I've heard some people who had a great one. Mm-hmm. And as I always do, I love the dip. The dip was great, and I think the dip is the one that really opened my eyes. But what was it about the dip that was great? I mean, I did learn a lot of knowledge was imparted upon me, but also the style of the teaching of the dip was very much about self-reflection, autonomy, and that kind of learning, and sort of the reasons why that's effective. Mm-hmm. And when you actually learn that as a teacher, then you start doing it from that point on. So you start having a bit of reflection, a bit of self-reflection in your kind of daily teaching, and you gradually get better. And then you become this kind of this autonomous, self-improving teaching machine.
Yeah.
It just gets better and better.
Maybe to bring it all back to the clip, maybe rather than teach English as a foreign language class, it would be better reflect on your English as perceived as a foreign language or something. I don't, whatever. But have that reflection of thinking, how can I better communicate with a non-native English speaker, and how would that be applied in a classroom? How would I do that in day-to-day life if you are an English speaker looking to better communicate with non-native English speakers? A lot of it is down to reflection, in the same way as teaching and becoming a better teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so that is all for today. I have been Neil of Team Teacher fame. You can check out teamteacherchina.com for some of my materials, PowerPoints you can use instantly in the classroom. Teacher China, the YouTube channel where we put those materials into videos, and you can kind of see how we teach them. Team Teacher English, where we put those materials into self-study videos, normally for kids, or you can give to homework. And Team Teacher Baby, where I take my experience as a teacher and put it into parenting. And the Pro, what about you?
Yeah, my name is Pro Fritch.
I like what you did there. That was witty. Terribly witty.
Pro Fritch Gaming, Twitter TV is Pro Fritch Gaming for gaming streams, and YouTube.com/Professor Rich for English learning. And yeah.
And if you've got any perspective on the stuff that you've listened to today, if you're a native English speaker, if you're a non-native English speaker and you've dealt with native English speakers, leave some comments below. Let us know your experiences, and if you are looking to get on the show, remember to email us at eltunderthecovers@gmail.com, and like, share, and subscribe.